buzzword in the media today is the influencer. And do you think it would be correct to say that Rabbi was and still is the greatest influencer of our times for all people, Jews and non-Jews alike?
I would say that, and I think that we're finding out more and more every day. Influences that we never thought, we never knew, we never heard. It's way beyond what we're aware of for a very simple reason. He was such a great influence because he didn't really want or care to be known as the influencer. So many things he did so quietly, so privately, so innocently, that we find out about it only by accident. And there must be many, many things that he did that we will never know because he really didn't want the attention. And if it was helpful to keep it quiet, he kept it quiet. I got to tell you, the Rebbe once sent a message to Brezhnev. It was interesting how and through whom, and the Rebbe asked that he allow all the books, the libraries that were confiscated by the communists, to allow them all to be shipped out. Not only his own library, the library that belonged to the previous Rebbe, but every synagogue that was condemned and closed had a library. So the Rebbe sent a message to Brezhnev saying, we need the books, they're sitting and doing nothing. If we have them, we'll use them. It'll be productive. So he should allow it all to come out. Now, the Rebbe said to him, if you're worried that your opposition is going to use that as a sign of weakness, that you gave in to pressure from the outside, we can do it all without anybody knowing. And you can trust us because you know that we never participated in an anti-Soviet protest. And in case you say you don't know where these books are, I will send an expert. It was in the Lenin library. He said, I will send an expert and he will identify all the books correctly. So the Rebbe covered like every possible reason to refuse. But it was interesting that the Rebbe says, you can trust us. We're not looking for publicity.
Is it fair to say that everybody is here today, the entire Russian immigration in America, due to Rabbi?
It's a good question. What happened to communism? Where did it go? Who did this? It is a little mysterious. Some people say that President Reagan destroyed communism. He brought it down. Yeah, he gets some credit, there's no question. Others say that the Rebbe did it. Or that Chabad in Russia did it because they saw they can't destroy it. They tried very hard, by the way. And thousands of Chassidim were killed in this battle. And they couldn't. They didn't. So it makes sense that Gorbachev woke up one morning and said, look, we're not winning this battle. It's not worth it. So yeah, fine, religious freedom, okay. What, are we going to destroy ourselves over this? But the amazing thing, if you want to get a little mystical, there was a Professor Bronover who came out of Russia before Gorbachev. And he was in Israel. They opened a special department for him in electrohydromagnetics or something. he was really the expert on the subject. The Rebbe sent him a message one day saying that he should open up housing and businesses and positions in universities for the Russians that are going to be coming out from Russia. He thought maybe like a dozen, and the Rebbe said no. Anyway, so eventually Gorbachev came, and Gorbachev did what he did with Glasnost and the whole thing. And then years later, this Professor Branover met Gorbachev. And he said to him, you know, that on such and such a date, the Rebbe told me that you're going to be allowing immigration from Russia. And Gorbachev said, what date? He tells him. He says, at that point, I had not even thought about it yet.
And then comes the question, of course. Did the Rebbe knew? Did he have special insights? Because was he just a man, or was he way more?
First of all, just a man is not so simple. A human being can be magnificent. We have a very limited and stingy view of human beings because we've seen the ugly side a lot. But what a human being can be should not be underestimated. And many people do that. Say, you know, the Rebbe was so smart, it wasn't human. How do you know? Because he was smarter than you, so it can't be human? We have no idea how smart a human being can be. All wisdom, all intelligence is in the soul, not in the brain. It comes from the soul into the brain, and then it's revealed knowledge. But all knowledge lies in the soul. The soul is aware. The soul knows. Because if you think about it, what does it mean, I don't know? Why is it acceptable to not know? What do you mean you don't know? Is 2 and 2 4? I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? Is it or isn't it? In other words, there's a part in your soul that knows. Whatever there is, whatever it knows. How did we get to not know? In other words, not knowing is unnatural. It's an unnatural restriction on what should naturally be. We should know. Because if you're a human being, you have intelligence, not potential intelligence. So the restriction on knowing is because we don't have access to the soul that knows. But the soul that we have does know. So learning, concentrating, studying, researching, it's all the attempt to get past the resistance or the blockage so that we know consciously what our soul already knows. So where are you dragging information from when you sit and concentrate? What are you doing? Our teacher in yeshiva once came over to one of the boys and said, you read this little piece of the Gemara, the Talmud? He says, yeah. He says, do you understand what it's saying? Because there seems to be a contradiction. He says, yeah, there's a contradiction. He says, so what's the answer? And the boy sat quiet. So the teacher said, do you know the answer? He says, no. He says, so what are you thinking? The boy said, I'm thinking of the answer. He said, no, you're not thinking. You don't know the answer. You can't be thinking of the answer. So what are you thinking? Not such a fundamental question. I ask you a riddle and you're thinking. What are you thinking? The question you know already. The answer you don't know. So what are you thinking? And if you think hard and deep, you'll come up with an answer. From where? So it's a strange thing. I sit there for hours. I don't know. I don't know. I don't understand. Oh, right. I know. What happened? The light went on. You're trying to access the intelligence of your soul where you do know. So actually, what are you thinking? I mean, if you want to function intelligently, when you have a question and you don't know the answer, what are you thinking? Obviously, you're not thinking the answer because you don't know it. What you're thinking is, where might the answer be? Should I look in this direction? Should I look in that direction? You think about the question, right? 2 plus 2. What is the result? Where are you going to find the answer? That's called brilliance. Brilliance is you immediately know where to look. So potentially, every person can be a genius because the information is in your soul. The genius is the one who knows where to find it, how to access it. So human beings really can be unbelievably intelligent. Imagine if you had complete access to everything your soul knows. There would be nothing you don't know. Because what is. 2 and 2 is 4. How can you not know that? Then you go to a very complex mathematical equation. Well, it's also a fact, right? Like 2 and 2. So how come you don't know that? So if we weren't blocked, we would know everything. Everything about the world, nature, creation. In the previous Rebbe's writings, he describes a chassid of the Alter Rebbe, like 200 years ago, a man by the name of Zezmer, probably the name of a city or a town, right? Anyway, he says this man, he knew everything his soul knew. He had no block. That is pretty awesome. So a human being is just a human being? And, don't minimize it. So even if he was just a complete unblocked human being, it would be scary smart. So did the Rebbe know intelligently that communism is finished? And it's a matter of days? Did he have really good spies who understood the circumstances and that Gorbachev really didn't have much of a choice? Communism was going down. He had to figure out, am I going to go down with it like a sinking ship? Or am I going to be the hero and say, yeah, let's get off the boat? So was that all calculated? A good spy network, which the Rebbe did have, and even the Israeli Shin Bet, who also had spy networks in Russia. When they ran into the Chabad shluchim over there, they said, you know that? Oh, we don't know nothing. They were way ahead. So anyway, so the Rebbe had a brilliant system, and he was determined to destroy communism because it's an evil, unholy thing. Or was it a little prophetic? And if it was a little prophetic, is that so unbelievable? people who have a sixth sense. We know there's more to nature than we've discovered so far. So there's, there's the physical and there's the metaphysical. It's all part of creation.
But he was amazing at channeling that his soul, because he was able to answer any questions on any topic, political, scientific, technological. I mean, he spoke many languages. Obviously, just an intellect of a person would not give him such abilities. So, I mean, what are some of the greatest examples that you know of that influenced the world just through his advice to the people who made decisions?
Do you know that the Rebbe was one of the few people in the world who could converse in Latin? Even people who study Latin, they can't carry on a conversation in Latin. They can read it and translate it, but the Rebbe, one of the few people in the world.
Who would understand him, though?
Yeah.
Who would understand him?
Right. There were very few people that the Rebbe could really talk to on his own level. So in a sense, he was very lonely. It's lonely at the top,
Mm-hmm.
His wife, one of the few people he could talk to on his level. The greatest thing, the most unexpected, the Rebbe truly felt like he had failed in his life's mission.
That's explain, please.
The humility, with all of that brilliance, with all that power, with all that influence, with all that respect and admiration, he felt like it was unforgivable that he had not completed his mission, his task, or the task that he put on himself. That was like a combination of two extremes that you really don't expect to see. So one of the reasons that the Rebbe could answer any question and give advice to any situation and be confident, the confidence was stunning. Is precisely because of his humility. There was no ego. I'm right, I'm wrong. This is the answer. It has nothing to do with me. So, I mean, that is also a sign of genius. A genius is not conscious of the fact that he's the genius. He's only conscious of the genius. So when you asked him a question and he answered, he trusted the answer as if it were coming from somebody else. Sometime a guy came in and asked the Rebbe a question for advice about his situation. The Rebbe answered him. He left the Rebbe's room and he suddenly remembered that he had forgotten to describe the problem in all of its details. And he felt that some of those details were essential. So he asked the secretary if he could go back and so the secretary went into the Rebbe and said, the man wants to come back in, and he left out some details. And the Rebbe said, he's got his answer, with or without those details, which in a sense means, I know, I filled in the details, don't worry about it. It was, anyway, the point of it is this. In every stage of history, God's purpose God's intention, God's plan is directed, revealed, and taught by one person. Throughout all of our history, there was always the person who set the tone for a certain era in history. So we've had thousands and thousands of great scholars, geniuses, and that make up the library of Torah knowledge. But there was one person who could express what God was asking for at that time under those circumstances. In other words, which part of Torah, which mitzvah, which section is the urgent one for our times? In the 20th century, that person was the Rebbe. So aside from being a genius and being a passionate defender of truth and of Jews and of Torah, which every rabbi should be, the Rebbe's role was that of like the Moses of our generation, because it's necessary. There are so many aspects and so many dimensions to God's plan. How do you know which one to focus on? What do we need in this generation? So some people, some sages, rabbis, said, the study, the fantastic study of Torah in Europe, Poland and Russia particularly, was so fantastic, and it all got disrupted. We got to bring back the learning. That's the main thing. You got to sit and study, put everything else aside. That's the call of the hour. Restore the education, the knowledge. The Rebbe said, in this generation, we need to think of each other. You need to reach out to others. If you want to study with somebody. Don't do it for yourself. We got to change the world, not just the classroom. That was the big debate. And in some areas, it's still a debate in orthodoxy. So the Rebbe set the tone for an unprecedented application of Torah. And in that sense, he is the Moses of our generation. And it met with a lot of resistance at first. Like in the 50s, nobody agreed with the Rebbe. Sending young couples away from Jewish communities into places where there is no kosher food available, where there's no mikveh for the women to go to, where you don't have 10 people keeping Shabbos together. And this young couple is going to be exposed to all of that. That was the Rebbe's project. And everybody said, this is a disaster. 40 years later, there isn't a single Jewish organization that isn't proud of the fact that they do outreach. Maybe not with the devotion of a shliach who buys a one-way ticket to the city where he's going and he's there for life. That's still unusual, rare. But everybody feels like, what, you're not doing any outreach? Then you don't count. You're a nobody. So that really is the positive revolution in Jewish practice that the Rebbe single-handedly championed, because for this generation, there's where you put your efforts and there's where you put your focus.
He outreached a lot. I found out that he outreached way beyond the Jewish community because I got numbers from Chabad.org, which is the main Lubavitcher site. There are 50 million unique users a year, and there's only 15 million Jewish people in the world. So the interest is a lot higher from the outside world. How did that trickle past from the Jewish community into the rest of the world? How did that influence others as well?
One of the revolutionary things that the Rebbe introduced is that we have an obligation to teach the rest of the world, we as Jews. This is an obligation that we have not been busy with for the last 1,000 years for sure. Because we're going to tell non-Jews, they'll shoot you. You can't come to non-Jews who have their own religion and tell them what's right or wrong. But 20th century is different. Many other religions have basically thrown in the towel. They just don't know. What did God ask? What does he want? We don't know anymore. Because some say, thou shalt not kill. Some say thou must kill. So what are you going to do? When the leaders of the spiritual leaders of a movement turn out to be immoral, where do you go? It's devastating. So people started thinking, who still has the original message? Where is the original document? Maybe the Jews know. So the Rebbe said, okay, now it's time to fulfill this obligation that has been waiting 1,000 years, 2,000 years. So as if we don't have enough to do with reaching out to other Jews, the Rebbe says, no, that's not enough. You have to reach out to the whole world, because unless the whole world is holy, the project is not successful. And besides, just out of sheer human concern, it's not just a question of what your beliefs will be. It's what will your lifestyle be. And if it's a wrong belief, it's going to lead to tragic results. So out of compassion for human beings, you can't watch them destroy themselves with false beliefs, because it does affect your everyday life.
Rabbi Friedman, you said that the Rebbe was the Mashiach, I'm sorry, not the Mashiach. It's exactly what I didn't want to say. He is the Moses of our times. But a lot of people say the other way around, that he is the Mashiach. And they're also, again, the people are saying it, not the Rebbe said it. So this causes a lot of controversy among many people. Very recently, I heard an amazing interview that you gave about that he was the one who came to prepare the world for the Mashiach. Can you please elaborate on that? Because that really made things so much more clear and so much more logical.
Well, there are a few things. When you exaggerate a little bit, you cause huge problems. It's really important. Stick to the truth. It doesn't need to be improved on. It doesn't need to be hyped. Just stick to the truth. So those, who got excited. The Rebbe is going to be Mashiach. He was Mashiach. He is Mashiach. There's no need to exaggerate. And to give the Rebbe compliments that he doesn't even want. Well, here's the thing. Was Moshe the Mashiach? Of his generation, obviously. He brought them out of Egypt. So to them, he was Mashiach enough. Like Dayenu, right? If you take us out of Egypt and bring us to Mount Sinai, that's enough of a Mashiach for us, because it's exactly what we needed. So to that generation, yes, he was their Mashiach. In fact, sometimes Moshe is referred to as the Mashiach, the first Mashiach. We are waiting for the final Mashiach. So if the Rebbe was the Moshe of our generation, then he was also the Mashiach of our generation. That's true. Because if you are the voice of God for the generation, well, that is in a very real sense a liberator. Mashiach means the liberator. The Mashiach, the one that we are praying for thousands of years, liberates the entire world forever. That's a different story. So yes, for our purposes, for our needs after the Holocaust, to be liberated from that depressed condition to an optimism and an enthusiasm for life, to actually reach out to others rather than just trying desperately to survive, which is what most people were doing after the war. Yeah, that's Mashiach. He is the liberator of our generation. Don't exaggerate. In some sense, every true leader who is worthy of the title, is a person who prepares the world and moves the world towards the goal that Mashiach will complete. So who's more impressive, the king or the king maker? Like, who's the real power behind the throne? The guy sitting on the throne, or those who made it happen?
Rabbi Friedman, you actually worked with the rabbi. You knew him personally. I cannot possibly imagine how that experience must have been. What was it for you?
To be perfectly honest with you, people who worked with the Rebbe far more than I did, will tell you that they are no closer to the Rebbe than the guy who never met him. To them, he remained a complete mystery. Whereas one of them said, just when I thought I had him figured out. I think, okay, I see already. It's predictable. He's going to say this. And then, no, he doesn't. So obviously, I'm no closer. It says about King Saul, the first Jewish king. And God is saying this of him. He is head and shoulders above the people. And he wasn't talking about his height. Although maybe he was, I don't know. You know what head and shoulders means? The head is your intelligence, and shoulders are your emotions. You know, the right side is kindness, left side is severity or hate, love and hate. So he's saying like this: a very smart person is heads above the rest, smarter than everybody else. This man is head and shoulders above everybody else's head, which means his emotions are smarter than your brain. And if that's the case, I just quit. I'm not even going to try to figure this out or to get close. No, the distance was unbridgeable. And that's why the Rebbe was so alone.
That's interesting. On one hand, he was unreachable, but on the other hand, those who study his teachings or those who read stories others tell about him, and there are tons of those stories. I personally can't get through a single story without crying because I feel such kindness coming from the Rebbe through those stories towards the whole world, not just to Jewish people, to the whole world, that it's beyond moving. And so he was so far and yet so close, and he helped so many without ever meeting them, seeing them. How, I mean, you answered that question. That comes from the soul, and to be able to channel your soul, but still, it's a miracle. To the rest of the world, it's a miracle.
So, head and shoulders above the rest, in practical terms, it means his kindness your brain cannot comprehend. Right? His emotions are higher than your brain. So, his mother, the Rebbe's mother, who he hadn't seen for many, many years when they got separated by the war and by the communists, when they finally met, the Rebbe flew to France to pick up his mother. She came out of Russia and she went to France. He could hardly recognize her. The suffering that she had been through. And there's some pictures of it, and it's frightening to look at. And then you look at her picture in the 60s, when she was in America, and her son is the Rebbe, and she comes to hear him farbring and speak and lead the davening and so on. She looks like a queen. She's beaming. So she said of him, when she got to know him again, she said, I've seen many, many great Jews in my time. The previous Rebbe's father, her own father. She saw some very great Jews. She said, I've seen some magnificent holy people, but my son carries it so naturally. Yeah. You have to be born to it. You have to. This is not something you can develop. Which leads us to another. We're going to be celebrating the holiday of Shavuos. That is the anniversary of the event at Sinai. That's when we became God's people. Chosen. That happened at Sinai. Before that, we were the children of Israel. We were a very nice, large family, but we were not a people. Whatever that means, I don't even know. Anyway, so we're going to be celebrating that anniversary for the 3,333rd time. What in the world keeps something going for 3,333 years? What? God asked us, our ancestors at Mount Sinai, will you accept my Torah? We said yes. He asked the second time, are you sure? Are you going to? And we said, yes. Whatever God says, we will do. So that was a commitment. a promise. And this commitment was so strong, and that promise was so sincere that 3,333 years later, we're still doing it. Not possible. There is no kind of a commitment that can last that long. And no promise is strong enough to keep something going for 3,000 years. So I can imagine God coming to us and saying, hey, you didn't do the mitzvah. You promised. First of all, I didn't promise. And my ancestor who did promise, I don't even know his name. So no, the promise can't be the explanation. Commitment, there's no commitment that is that strong. Stubborn, nobody is that stubborn. Come on. None of these adjectives, none of these characteristics can ever be strong enough to last 3,000 years. Not strong enough to last 1,000 years. It's not strong enough to last 1,000 good years. To explain how it lasted 3,000 years when 2,000 of those years were horrific, homeless, persecuted. Can't even begin to describe how horrible. And we're still doing it? Where do we look for an answer? How is this possible? Now, the other nations of the world are divided. Some of them say, wow, what's keeping them? This is awesome. They're still doing it. They haven't changed. They haven't quit. They haven't given up, despite everything we did to them. They must be the chosen people. Others are saying, what is it with these people? Can't get rid of them. Why are they still here? That's one of the things Mashiach has to fix. But the point is, there's no way that this could possibly happen unless the Jewish people and every individual Jew is born this way. It can't be something we took upon ourselves. That would last about a month if we know Jews. A month later, people say, who promised? What, you speaking for me? You didn't ask me. Why'd you promise me? I'm not doing this. It wouldn't last a month. It must be that we are designed in our very DNA for this mission. And so it's not unnatural that we're still doing it. It would be unnatural if we didn't. That's the only possible explanation. So, speaking about how the Rebbe was born to it and therefore carries it so naturally, that's the explanation for the Jewish people in general. So let me add one thing. There was one year, just from a personal experience, on the second day of Rosh Hashanah, that's my phone. On the second day of Rosh Hashanah, there's a custom of going to a water where there are fish and throwing your sins into the water, so to speak. So in Crown Heights, everyone got together to walk to the park, in Prospect Park, Botanical Gardens, and there was a beautiful lake there, and we all gathered at the lake and did this tashlich. The Rebbe walked in front, and everybody walking behind him was singing all the way. And people are leaning out their windows from all the apartment buildings and they're watching this parade. Many years I walked behind the Rebbe, but there was one particular year, the Rebbe was shining. There was something really royal about him. And I'm thinking, well, wow, look. People noticed that regal, that royal aura, whatever it was, which usually he would hide but now it was broadcast, you know. And then I noticed that there was a mounted policeman at the park, and he saw the Rebbe, and he wasn't sure that he had actually seen, so he turned the horse around again to look at the Rebbe, and the horse kept moving, and he kept turning the horse back because he wanted to look at, he was just like, wow, what is that? That's called carrying the mantle naturally. It suits him, it fits him, he was born to this. So when we celebrate the holiday this year, of course, it's the celebration of the Torah. We were given the Torah. So usually the focus is on the greatness of the Torah, the beauty of the Torah, the holiness of the Torah. I think this year, because it's 3,333, I don't know if there's a significance to 3333. This year, I think we should focus on the fact that the keepers of the Torah, the students of the Torah, are as magnificent as the Torah. The fact that we're still doing it, the only explanation is we were designed, created, and born to this mission. It's in our DNA.
Rabbi Friedman, I just had a thought today that today is the 28th. This is the official end of lockdown in New York. This is the day right before Shavuos. I look at Shavuos as the day that we got a job from God to understand his wishes and to be able to teach the rest of the world about his laws, wishes, and intentions. And this is the day the rest of New York, which is the capital of the world and home of the rabbi, is actually getting back to work. So, and then there's this 333, and every holiday coincides, and the whole world is sinking. I don't know what to make of it. Please channel your soul to say, is this it? Are we there yet?
We've always been in the process. We don't say Mashiach is going to come. He is coming, and he's been coming for a long time, because every step in the right direction is a step closer. But that was all based on faith. It's like the farmer who sits through the winter, knowing that the spring will come. I don't see it. It keeps snowing. It's still freezing, but no, it will. Right? Faith. But then you start seeing a little vegetation showing up. It's happening. It was always happening, but we're finally seeing it. Today, every day you can see with your eyes that we have moved forward. And that is, I think I mentioned it last time, the evil is becoming so evil that it's going to kill itself. Evil is committing suicide in front of our eyes. Because when the evil is so glaring, with no attempt to even justify it, you take a little bit of goodness that evil has, you take it out, the evil just shrivels up and dies. So in front of our eyes, the evil is committing suicide. And that's a preparation for Mashiach.
And I thank you once again for being with us on RUSA Radio, giving your wisdom, giving your insights, and really doing what we're supposed to be doing, teaching the world about the ultimate wisdom. Thank you.
Let me give you one more thought. You have a minute?
Yes.
The way the Torah describes the festivals, the exact wording in many occasions, because it's mentioned many times in the Torah. Observe my holidays. Observe my festivals. My festivals. Very important word. God is saying, I observe this holiday. Do it with me. Observe my festival means observe it with me. So how is this his festival? Why does he celebrate the day of Shavuot? Because he can't get over the fact that we said yes. To him, this is a festival. And we celebrate it because we can't get over the fact that he chose us. That's a relationship. So it's our festival, ours and his. So really celebrate it. And there's nothing you need to do. There's no particular mitzvah. You don't blow shofar, you don't eat matzah, you don't build a sukkah, nothing. Because this is where it all started. It's this day that we found out that there's such a thing as a sukkah and a shofar and a matzah. So it's the festival of festivals. And what is the highlight of it? We read from the Torah the description of the event at Sinai.
And how exciting, about just a week before the holiday, we are allowed to actually do that. And seems like the whole world is about that.
So the holiday actually begins Thursday night. Friday is already the first day of Yom Tov. Shabbos is the second day. And we say Yizkor for those who are in need of that on the second day, on Shabbos this year. So we should have only good news, because that's all that's happening. We just have to appreciate it. Every day is better than the day before. Watch, you'll see it in the news. Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach. Thank you so much, Rabbi Friedman, especially to end on such a positive note. And Amen. Thank you. Chag Sameach.
Be well.